Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. On this episode, we're talking to Caspar Schols, a Danish physicist turned architect whose innovative designs have captured the imagination of cabin enthusiasts around the world. His work is not just about creating beautiful spaces. It's about rethinking how we live, connect with nature, and find comfort in simplicity. Caspar's design, Cabin Anna, is one of the most unique and versatile cabins you'll ever see, blending functionality with a deep connection to the natural world. In this episode, we'll explore Caspar's journey from physics to architecture, his philosophy behind cabin living, and how his designs have become a statement of living more connected and meaningful lives. We'll also discuss the profound impact of nature on his work and personal life, and the incredible journey of taking Cabin Anna from a concept for his mother to an internationally acclaimed design. As always, we'll touch on some thought-provoking questions. What makes a cabin a cabin? How do we balance comfort with connection to nature? And why are more people drawn to these intimate, transformative spaces? So get ready to be inspired by Caspar Schols and his remarkable story. Let's do it. You're one of the first guests ever where I just found your design online, and I can't even remember how. It might have been Pinterest, it might have been Google, and I was like, holy shit, I need to talk to him. This design is unlike anything I've ever seen.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so for those of you who are listening, I feel like before you even listen to this, you really need to head and look at the design first. On YouTube, we're going to drop a photo or two in here so that you can see it. But it truly is one of the most unique designs I've seen in the cabin world before. Can you start by introducing yourself and taking us back to where your introduction to cabin culture started? Like before Cabin Anna, just what made you fall in love with cabins and that kind of relationship with nature?
Yeah, good question. So my name is Caspar. I am actually by training a physicist. After finishing physics, I had this urge of making stuff. As a boy, I was always making stuff. My three older brothers were playing soccer and hockey, all the stuff. In the weekend, I was making paper mache models with 10 girls in a room somewhere in the village. So that came sort of back at the end of my physics degree, and I decided to join art school here in Amsterdam, the Gerrit Rietveld Academy. Did that for 1 year, and then decided I had sort of the choice either to stay there or maybe to go to a more architectural school. I found the perfect school, or I would almost say the perfect school found me. There was the Architectural Association in London, which is a very art-based architecture school. So that was amazing. I studied there for 3 years. Because of the cabin, actually, I received a scholarship to study there.
So you had designed the cabin before you went there?
Yeah, I was before that. Yeah. So actually, I graduated in physics. Then I joined the art school, and then my mother asked if I could help her buy or build a cabin in her forest plot, and I worked on that for a year, and then from that I ended up in London studying architecture, which was really, really coming home. I still love physics. I think it's an incredible subject, but architecture and making, and that is really my home.
It seems like a nice mix. Architecture feels like a nice, because physics, from my minimal recollection from high school, is very math driven, very precise and scientific, and less creative. Architecture kind of takes that and adds a creative element to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think it's super well. Yeah, true. But having said it, I never calculate anything. No, in that sense, I never use it. The way I use it actually is more based on, I think, the perspective that physics gives you on the world is just incredible, because you spend weeks, months, years calculating stuff that you can't even imagine. You calculate black holes. You calculate the quarks. You're dealing with all these phenomena that are not part of our daily life, that we cannot imagine, like particles being in the same time, particles being entangled. So it's such a different world. I think that it sort of naturally does two things. It takes you out of sort of, it blows your mind so much that you feel like sort of restrictions are, it's, let's say, I think it helps thinking out of the box. And on the other hand, it's sort of realizing that, I don't know, like it realizes that you don't really have anything to lose, you know? Like it's so ridiculous what we're part of. It's so ridiculous that just do whatever you want to do, you know? Like do follow your heart. And like for me, I don't know, but it's one of the things that helped me just take more independent choices, I always think.
Is it because it makes you feel like, because when I think about black holes or space or anything like that, I just, even at night outside looking up at the stars, it makes me feel like, oh my God, I'm so small relative to all of this. And then I think about the stuff that I'm stressing about in my day-to-day life, and I'm like, does this matter at all? And so to your point, when you're studying physics, you're living in that world. So then it's like, well, maybe what I'm doing day to day is not so consequential as I might have thought that it was.
No, for sure. I think it's somehow as exact, like it's like an exact science, as scientific as it is. It's actually super spiritual, I think, to study physics somehow. Well, that's how I experienced it. And you asked me so as a boy, I grew up in the forest, so I was always building huts. So that's where it started. But the first book, actually much later, there's actually two books. This one is which has nothing to do actually with cabins, but that's one book. And the other book I got later is actually this one. So that was a Taschen book. This was my favorite book from when I don't know, I was 16 or something. Like the most cool, small. Yeah, some are big, but houses in the world.
For folks who can't see that, it says 100 contemporary houses.
Exactly. And this one is Rock the Shack from Gestalten.
I love that name.
Yeah, exactly. And they have a whole series. And now, this was, I think, the first one they did on that. This is like 10 years old now.
Oh my gosh, I need one of those at my cabin. Wait, can you read the subtitle? Amazing. Yeah, it says...
The architecture of cabins and cocoons and hideouts. But go to... I don't want to make a
plug.
But Gestalten is the best, the most beautiful books on cabins. I think. Well, there's many beautiful books, but that's sort of where my fascination started. But I think also like just I love working with my hands, so I love detailing stuff. The cabin just allows you to actually finish stuff, because I think most houses don't even feel finished to me because it's too big.
Yeah.
Too big to look at the details.
Yeah. This is interesting because I've had a love of cabins since I was a young child, like an emotional pull to them, and I could never really explain it. And I still struggle. On every episode of the podcast, we ask like what makes a cabin versus a house, and everyone has different thoughts. Yeah. But I haven't ever quite heard it explained that way. When there's too much going on around you, then it's almost distracting and incomplete, versus when you have something. I've never used the word hut before in this conversation, and I really like that because it makes me think of intimacy. Yeah, like a really small space.
Yeah, and then intimacy is very much related to having a connection with something, like with someone. If it's an intimate relationship, it's very close relationship, and I think that's what, when you have focus on something, when you concentrate on, like, I think it's about quality, it's about intimacy, connection, and there's this, especially in the US actually, but also in Europe, is like you measure the value of a house. Well, one is obviously for location, but the other thing is for size.
Yeah.
Like it's really about square meters. Yeah. It doesn't even matter what they look like, how are they detailed, how they made. Like, if you like, not that I'm into cars, but if you buy a car, it doesn't matter if it's like one car might be, let's say, 6 square meters and the other one 7, but the one can cost 5,000 and the other one can cost 300,000. Like
Yeah.
it's not related to the skill at all. It's
Yeah.
related to how much effort was put in making that
Huh.
product.
But houses are
So
not like that. You're so right. I'm like upside down in our cabin because, except I own the land, but it's only 800 square feet. But the amount of
yeah,
money we put into crafting
yeah,
it to be just
exactly.
right.
Time and yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But if you just look at numbers, real estate would say like, oh, well, 800 square feet, one bedroom,
yeah,
it's only worth X. And in
exactly. No,
reality,
it's
it's,
often yeah, exactly. No, it's often the first question we get is like, it's this price. How many square meters is it? But I always explain it like this, like it's not if you buy a boat, if you buy a beautiful crafted piece of furniture, if you buy a chair, are you gonna? No one asks how big is a chair. Oh, it's 10,000 euros for the chair. How big is it? Like they know. So why is
yeah,
10,000? Because there was a guy who was building a whole year. He was crafting that chair.
yeah,
That's why. And I always think like I rather buy one chair for 10,000 euros than I buy 20 for, like I just want to have quality in everything. Like
hmm,
one good meal a day rather than six shit meals.
yeah. It goes back to cost-based pricing versus value-based pricing. And so much of us, when we are running businesses and we name our price based on how many materials did we use and how much did those cost. So therefore, I'm going to charge this and maybe mark it up a little bit instead of
Yeah,
asking on the flip side,
yeah,
how valuable is this to someone? What
yeah,
potential does this cabin have to change your life? What's the price tag on that? How do you name that value? So instead, I think so many businesses lean back on the cost based pricing because it's easy to explain to someone. Oh, well, we use this much lumber, so that's why it's this much.
yeah.
The other one is really hard and could change based on the person what that value is to them. Can you try to? I'm sure you can explain it better. I've watched every video on your website, so I've seen exactly what it can do, but articulating that is hard. Can you explain to someone who's never seen it exactly what the Cabin Anna is like?
Yeah. Also to go back to the question how it started, is like
Yeah.
I come from a family, like from an outdoor family. We grew up in the forest. My dad, who passed away when I was 20, way too young.
Yeah.
He was way too young when he passed away, but he was a nature person. My mother is like she's almost a tree, like she is nature.
Oh,
But how I think the fascination for being like the one thing that I should mention about my father passing away, with which I struggled a lot with when I was young, like yeah, in my early 20s. What brought me back was I was sort of lost in space because uh, I death wasn't part of my vocabulary. Like I didn't know people could die. Yeah, you know it, but not when
in
someone
your
that close, that
20s, I
important.
know.
You don't know. I couldn't understand it. So it meant that I sort of lost kind of in a strange way faith in reality. And then what brought me back is actually my father guiding me with his love for nature, back to nature, and that grounded me again. So that made me sort of trust, and it made me understand to connect to reality and to feel the physicality of the world around me. Um,
How long did
and
it take?
basically,
Can I ask how long that took for like I also lost my mom when she was pretty young and this cabin was my way of kind of like
okay, that's so interesting
reconnecting to
to
Maine.
hear that we have a similar experience there. Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did it take that feeling of being lost and then realizing, oh, this might be a way to reconnect?
I think so. I After we buried my father, a day after that, I did another physics exam, and like I was not, I did almost like I didn't care. For 2 years, I was like, yeah, no, it's sad, but it didn't really, I don't know why, but it didn't hit me yet, I think. And then suddenly, I started having panic attacks, couldn't sleep anymore, like, and after that, I think it took me a good and I don't know, it depends how you, like for 2 years I was literally upside down, and from that I sort of started the whole journey. And part the beginning of the journey was going to Scandinavia to hike there and just be in the forest and sleep in the outdoors and swim in the lakes and bathe in the rivers. And that was literally when I started to calm down. Like every day I felt better. And that is, if I look back, how Anna started. Sort of like the sleeping under a tree next to a river without the tent, without just a sleeping bag. That's what in the end made me calm down and trust, okay, I don't understand reality. I don't know why it is the way it is, but it's real and I know I can trust it and it's here and I connect to it, I can communicate to it. And also the fact, like that waking up, like in the beginning it's a bit scary, of course, well, to me it was, but waking up and then there's an animal, like there's a caterpillar walking over you with a leaf in his mouth, and crossing, sort of finding the shortest route from A to B over you. And he's on his way doing something. I don't know, he decided, this leaf I found here and I want to bring it there. It has to go there.
He's on a mission.
He's on a mission. He doesn't care about you, doesn't care about anything. So this world is just continuing continuously. And that just helped me come back. And that was sort of, when I came back, was designing how can I start over from nothing? How can I start building up from, okay, I have nothing. Let's say I'm naked under a tree. What do I need?
Yeah.
And I started thinking, okay, I need a platform so I can put stuff in that platform, because I might need some store my clothes a bit and stuff. And I was like, yeah, but then when it starts raining, what am I going to do? Am I going to put up an umbrella, or can I put some, so, okay, I can make a glass layer on top of me. And I was like, okay, but yeah, what if there's a lot of sun that day? Okay, maybe I need something to have to shade myself from the sun. So, but in the same time, because every day, because that's what I'm describing is basically how you build a house, of course. But then it's like, if I don't need that layer, I don't want it. I don't want that boundary. So it's really like, okay, in the summer I might not need any of that if there's not so much wind. In the winter I might need like a big insulated layer around me. So it's basically a platform with two sliding layers on top. One is of glass, is the inner layer, and the other one is of wood and insulated. And you can sort of, I see it like sort of how you deal with your clothing. In the summer, you can, you don't need anything, and in the winter you have several jackets on top of several layers, and there's just something about the direct connection with, I mean, it's nice to be comfortable, and it's important to be comfortable, it's important to be safe, but it's also very, I'm not sure if I would use the word dangerous, but it's also, you lose so much at some point being in a room, like here, I'm now in an apartment in Amsterdam, which also, I mean, has also its benefits, but if you're in the room and the temperature is always 20 degrees and you don't experience the wind, you just lose everything at the cost of, you get the comfort at the cost of all the things that actually might make your experience of living very beautiful.
Yes. I think of that like, I used to live in my city. I lived downtown and I would bike everywhere. And the occasion when I had to drive somewhere, and then I moved a little bit further and I had to drive everywhere, it took a couple weeks, but I realized how disconnected I felt from my city. Just like I was like a little person just moving throughout it. But when I would bike places and had nothing around me, for some reason, you could like wave at people or shout at someone if you knew them, or hear things or feel things in a way that connected me with the city. Very different than the woods. But I always thought the car was the convenient, comfortable choice and the bike was just like more environmentally responsible, but actually it was like more rewarding in other ways that I hadn't thought about. And that's kind of what this feels like when you describe it. in a comfortable, fancy cabin like mine, which is well insulated and you have heat and all the things, heated mattress pad cover, like you have everything you need. What are you missing? What is that actually taking away from the experience? It's interesting when you talked about starting with the very basic and adding things in. It reminds me of, remember I feel like minimalism had its moment, and there was a book, at least here in the States, and everyone was talking, I need to have a minimalist wardrobe, and their recommendation was to put all of your clothes and all of your stuff into a storage unit and then go to the storage unit whenever you needed something. So if you absolutely needed to use it, go and take it out. And then after 2 months, whatever you had in your apartment or your house was all you really needed. Then get rid of the storage unit. Everything else can go, right? And that's kind of how you're describing it.
Yeah.
Like strip it down to nothing and then just slowly add in exactly what you need.
That's fine. It's really interesting what you say. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I feel like now you're, can you tell people, you're in Amsterdam right now. Where did you grow up?
Yeah. In Eindhoven, which is, we grew up in a forest near Eindhoven, which is in the south of the Netherlands. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a medium-sized city. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I've never been there, but my perception from here is that minimalism is much more a thing in design and aesthetic there than it is here in the States. Is that true? Because when I see your cabin, it feels so different. But is it more normal there, or is it still kind of distinct in that way?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's more. No, I mean, in general, it's actually this. I mean, there's so many interesting contradictions because one of the things. So we are actually building now this year. We're going to build 5 cabins in the United States, also in really cool remote locations. So we're going to go back, and I've been visiting those locations before. I love the United States for how extreme things are, but also the vast nature, of course. But also, there's things always have to be too big, too much, too like this. No, never like it. But it's a bit like I'm a child and I go to Disney World, or I go on a trip with my favorite uncle and everything is allowed, it's really cool actually, but maybe I'm not sure if it's would be good for me in the long run. But I think in Europe we do a bit the same, but just for us it's less extreme. But I think in architecture and art, especially in art, it's really and in music, it's really isn't it the same? You always sort of you can say a work is good. They also like when you take stuff away and it still works. Like when it's sort of you usually fuck it up by trying to do too many things at the same time.
Yes. In filmmaking, it's the same thing because I'm a filmmaker full time. That's what I do, and it's like someone once described it as a game of Jenga. Once you have your initial edit laid down, now go back and just keep pulling things out.
Yeah.
And see if it can still stand. And then the moment where you pull something out and it can't stand anymore, you've gone too far. But really, it's that idea of constantly taking out the extra so there's just enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Now I was going to add to that, like what you say you're a filmmaker, and I sometimes like to think of Anna. Like I just like to make things that I like buildings, furniture that somehow is dynamic and can move and you can play around with it. So you become a little bit of your own director almost. Like it's also a way to connect first to the cabin and then to the environment because you're constantly making it your own. But that is also what we like. There's this. I had this conversation with another friend. Like there's sort of 2 ways of being a designer, where one is you curate everything. Like you almost decide how this person is gonna live their day or whatever in that structure. Another one is sort of to provide tools for this person to be more guided somehow in curating their own experience. And with one thing that is often, I think especially I think always, I'm sure it's the same in filmmaking, when you make something you might not always know why you're doing it or what is it going to become, but when you look back things then make more sense. And what's really cool when I also had this thought when you asked the question before, like where does the design come from? Like the people that stay with us as guests, we often see that the first night when they arrive, they say, cool, I can move all these shelves, and like it's double layers, and it's something different. Okay, they start moving it, and then just before they go to bed, they're still in the forest. A lot of people come from the city. They're not familiar to the noises. It gets dark. It's way darker than at home. Like, okay, let's close it up. Like it's a bit scary. These are people that have never stayed in a tent, never slept in the outdoors, often. Then the second night, they feel a bit more comfortable, and a lot of them actually they have the courage to sleep under the glass. So they sleep sort of at least visually completely connected to the environment.
Yeah.
And then some, and if the weather allows, the third night they sleep with everything open.
Yeah.
And the response from people, well, you know it also because you're also an outdoor person, but this response from people, just the most basic thing in the world, waking up under a tree, waking up, you open your eyes and you look, you see up and you see the tree, is such an incredible experience every time again, especially if it's something completely new to you.
Yeah.
And I think that is sort of, in these moments, I feel like the design was really successful, that if it helps someone take one step closer, sort of out of their comfort zone, but still feeling comfortable, because they can decide any moment to step back in the comfort.
We have talked about this a lot with other cabin owners, of this idea of transitioning indoor people outside. And while luxury cabins, to me, even my own, at first it felt not rustic enough. I would have preferred that it be a little bit more, I don't know, not as polished, if you will. But when I've talked to folks, this idea of like, but if it were more rustic, it would have a different audience of people who might go camping or might stay at a rustic cabin. But then how do you get people from the cities who have a craving? They feel the absence of something, and they feel drawn to the woods somehow, but they don't have the comfort or familiarity from their childhood or from whatever. So how do you create spaces that bring them there and maybe do have heat or heated mattress pad covers, but also have large windows and skylights, and you have the feeling of waking up under the trees without. Now, ours, the most you can do is open a window. You can't quite move the entire structure aside in the way that yours transitions from day 1 to 3, I think is maybe the best example of that yet. But I think there's a place for that, for fancy outdoor structures to get people out there, and maybe the next time they'll be a little bit bolder in where they choose to stay.
Yeah, and like you say, it's a fine line. Like we have people that sometimes, like we get amazing responses, but sometimes there's someone that it's not for them, like, but like one example, you heat the cabin with a wood stove. Means, and people, we're year round, and then in the winter it actually goes below zero, so it's actually really cold. So we have really good blankets, the shelves insulated, even the glass insulated, and you have your wood stove. But if you go to bed, the stove is still on, and the temperature slowly goes down, and you maybe didn't take the right blanket yet, or you didn't, or it might be the case that you wake up in the night. And you can do two things when you wake up. Either you're going to get a second blanket, or you're going to have to put a little bit more wood on the stove. Or actually, the third one is like maybe you have to close another layer, like you close the wood so you have extra insulation. So there, like, we get response from people. It was so incredible. We woke up in the night. It was cold. We had to make the fire. We saw the stars. We were chatting a bit. We were hearing the night owls. We were hearing the animals in the night. It was incredible, But we've also had, and luckily this happens rarely, but there's also people that might complain. Say, I woke up in the night. It was too cold, and I went back to the city. And it's not that means that they're bad people or not, like they don't. It's just about where is their boundary and how far can. So it's always about how far can we get them out of the comfort zone, where nature is still nature. Like we sometimes have more insects than in other periods. We sometimes have wasps around. Are you going to remove a wasp nest, a natural wasp nest that is very close to the cabin, that might disturb people that sleep in it. Are you going to remove it or not?
Yeah.
I think it's always a very difficult
Yes.
question.
These are such hard questions that I think about all the time as a host of like, what is the line? And if it were
Yeah,
my cabin, that line would be so different than if I'm hosting
yeah,
100+ people every year. And I don't know about where you are, but I feel like the States is a very litigious, is that the right word? A very legal society where it's also about liability. If someone gets
yeah,
stung
yeah,
by a
yeah,
wasp
yeah,
and
yeah,
God forbid ends up in the hospital, like, can we get sued for that, right? And so
yeah.
it's
That's
all these
crazy. Yeah,
questions of like, what do I want them to experience, but how safe do I want them to be? And like
yeah,
that line is so tricky. And cabins by nature or by definition, in my opinion, are in the woods. So you are constantly grappling with those things as a host.
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So help me understand, you designed this and you sell the design. I'm curious about the business model. Are you also a host at your own cabin, or like what is the scope of the cabin
Yeah.
work that you're doing?
Yeah, no, basically we just build cabins.
Okay.
That's it. We can build. Uh, we do some custom work in some really cool special stuff. But we mainly focus on we have two cabins now. Well, actually one that we can deliver right now. Another one we're working on that will probably be available in this fall. And we just deliver it for you turnkey. So we have a team of crafters, workers, and designers, and we just make it the whole thing wherever you are, bring it to you, and make sure it's in perfect state and give you the key, and then
So you assemble
that's
all
what
of
we.
it too.
Yeah.
How long does that
Yeah.
process take?
It's dependent also a lot on the weather, location. Like if it's on a remote island, it's different from when it's a bit closer to let's say the world. But between yeah, it can be around 10 days. Sometimes maybe it can be less, can be more. Yeah, it can be 15 days, can be 8 days, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so you went to architecture school, but now you're running like a full-fledged, complicated business. If you are you managing the teams of builders? You've designed this, but you're also managing all of this, the delivery to remote islands, the expansion to the States. Are you doing all of this?
Well, I mean, yes, but I'm a terrible manager. That's for sure. I'm lucky enough to have people around me that are very good at this kind of stuff. But yeah, we have a team, and we of course we do that together. It's not a big. We're 8 people now, and we have like, for example, next year we're going to build 20 cabins. So it's not like yeah, we're a serious company in that sense, but we're also kind of a little family that likes building huts, let's say.
I love that. Where are the 5
Yeah,
locations you're going in the United States?
all East Coast.
Okay. Are any of them in
Yeah.
Maine?
Help me a bit again. Maine is
Furthest
close to
north. It's on the East Coast.
furthest north. Yeah, we're going to Vermont.
Oh, very close. That borders
Is
Maine.
that pretty close? Yeah.
Yeah. Where in Vermont? Or is this top
I'm not
secret?
sure how much. I'm gonna stay with Vermont for now. Yeah,
Okay.
we
Okay.
we sort of. I don't know. I don't want to bring anyone in. Officially, we don't tell where cabins are, but Vermont
Okay.
is big enough, I suppose, to say that.
It's actually very
Vermont.
small, but that's okay.
Yeah,
It's still
yeah,
it's
but
a
I think
state.
it's twice as big as the Netherlands. Um,
Oh, that's probably
but yeah,
true. Our perception of
yeah,
size might be different. Yeah.
yeah, very different. Yeah.
Okay, all East Coast. Now, are these going to individual owners who will use it on their own, or are they going to be
Yeah.
renting them? Like, is this something when people listen to this podcast, if they see your cabin and want to experience one, stay at one, is that something that will soon be coming to the States?
Yes, but it's very it's very so we really like normally we say like as a designer architect, usually someone comes to you with a piece of land and says, can you design something for this land? We turn it around like I want great. I want locations that fit with Anna. So I want people that fit with Anna also.
Yeah.
So we speak to a lot of people, and then when we feel that sort of almost friendship and a unique location, and it's almost like handing over our baby
Yeah.
to those people. Say, okay, we build it for you. It's here now, but now it's gonna lead a new life with you and with your dream. So it's people that there is a really amazing psychologist that has a big forest, and he's gonna build one next to a pond, and he's gonna have his clients there.
Wow.
No, I'm not sure if client is the word, but his patient's client.
Yeah.
Then there is actually one small eco resort, small scale, with a view over a valley. There's one woman that is going to make a sheep farm, and basically live in it part time. So she lives around New York, but she's going to live there and have her biological sheep farm there. There is someone who has an incredible old farm in I always get all these states confused. It's not Pennsylvania or this the other one.
New York.
Anyways, an old farm. Yeah, it's all sort of a few hours away from there. He's gonna he's running a regenerative farm, and he has guests that can stay over there, but it's also a place for him to stay. There is there's someone who's going to put one in his estate, just like sort of as a guest house. So some of them are rented out, but some of them are really for private use only. Yeah.
I kind of love that what you mentioned about all of them, though, is that they have a vision for their own use of it, and then they'll share it. And I kind of feel like that's always been my angle at the short-term rental industry, has been less about like portfolios and occupancy and more about sharing. I like to think of it as like the sharing economy. And those are always the best hosts too, because if you love it first and foremost for yourself, then getting to share it with someone else, you kind of, like you said earlier, you're guiding them through that experience. But if you don't love it first, then it's really hard to be that guide. It's just a guest in, guest out, turnover kind of situation.
Absolutely. And for us, and also in like the first cabin I built for my mother, so it was also the moment that I started receiving a lot of requests, the first thing I did, I sat down with my mother and said, what am I going to do? I mean, I built it for you. Would you mind if I built another one for someone else? And she actually said, well, no, of course I don't, but it depends on why you're building it for that person, like if are we going to tell a story together, like, is it because all these people that this Anna is they all sort of want to rethink how we live. They want to live somehow a more connected life with not just with nature, but the people around them, and with just the things they do from day to day. And so for me, I've always, even as a kid, dreamt of, we went to Canada when I was 7, and since then I've always said, like, I'm gonna immigrate to North America when I'm older, because just like coming from the Netherlands to a world in which there's such an incredible abundance of nature, animals, the smells, it's such an intense experience. And I always said to my parents, like, I want to live in that kind of world. I want to live in a world where, like, an abundance of nature. And so to me, Anna is much more of a, like you're a filmmaker. If I was good at making film, I would just make really cool films about nature, or podcasts like you. But I just happen to be good at one thing, and it's building huts. So I'm using that to tell that story about how you connect to nature, and I think it becomes stronger when I can do that with other people that also want to tell that story, although their own version of it, but it all connects to each other. And I've had it's really crazy, because it really feels like something. I mean, friendship is maybe a big word, but I've had the most incredible conversations with these people about anything really. Like sort of you immediately understand each
Yes.
other on a higher level.
Yes. I have found that in the cabin world in a way that I haven't found in other places. And I haven't really articulated it, but sometimes I'll get on a podcast with someone or Pete, who designed our cabin, is from Canada, and immediately felt that he also has a heart for small spaces that connect you to nature. And like I immediately connected with him. Now, obviously we went through a whole build together, which is an intimate experience, but there was just something at our core that I felt like he understood a part of me that some people who are in my everyday life, some of my friends, don't understand. And I found that through the podcast too, of meeting other people in the cabin world. There's just something that makes them tick that's a bit different. And now, of course, cabins are becoming more popular, so we're finding more people being drawn to that. And I don't think it's diluting it. Maybe it's just spreading, but it is interesting to observe what that commonality is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And you're finding that with all the people that then come to you and ask you to build cabins for them. Or I guess you're weeding through it, because it sounds like you're hearing from way more than you can actually build cabins for.
That's the thing. Like we're such a small company, and we can like we can only at the moment we can build 10, and next year our ambition is to go to 20. But it's also, again, it comes down to what kind of. I think if we would have the goal to build 100 a year, we would also achieve it. But it's really about keeping that quality. You know,
Yeah.
like at the moment, I can just oversee the quality of every cabin, and also the quality of the location where it goes, and the quality of the relationship with that person. And I think there is sort of, yeah. I think we should keep it special to we can only keep it, let's say, we can only keep it genuine if we want to live like how we preach, right? That's how
Yeah.
you say it.
Yeah. What role does your mom still play in it? Because when she originally said to you, like, are we going to tell this story together? Are you telling it together? What does that partnership look like now?
Well, she meant it she meant it more like tell it with those people, not necessarily in her with her, but well, she's extremely important just as a tree of wisdom to me. Like even I always find it so interesting. Like she's 70, and sometimes like it's a big word for it, but I say like business, like it's you still have to do business, to you need to earn money to do this. You need to so like business decisions in a big word is like sometimes no one knows the answer, and I go to my mother. And I don't know the answer. I go to my mother and I say like, yeah, I have this issue. What would you do? She knows nothing about business or money or anything, nothing. But she will give you the answer like, holy shit! Yeah, I asked this guy who's a big guy in this. I asked that guy who's a big guy in that, and they gave me answers, but I'm not sure if if it's helping me. And then she's like, yeah, but I think it makes sense to do it like this and that. So she is an incredible support, and a source of inspiration. A lot of our like a lot of our cabin owners, they always they want to meet her, they want to talk to her. She's just a very genuine, very very genuine, down to earth person. Like she's sort of like I say this in the best possible way when I call her a tree or an animal. She's a bit like she doesn't have that filter. She's not. She's really what she is, Like she's extremely good in being in the moment, being herself because she doesn't know what else to do.
I feel
And
like that's
yeah,
so rare right now.
yeah, it's difficult, but it's also difficult to. It's I feel it's quite a difficult. It's a challenging world, and it's easy to lose yourself in that.
Well, and with the growth of the internet, the more we have more influences on us than ever before. So being able to filter through that noise to actually know what your truth is underneath all of that. And then to feel comfortable communicating that consistently when anything you do can be put in front of a large audience of people, you just
Yeah.
there's
Also, yeah.
paralysis on both ends, I
Yeah.
feel like, that make that
Yeah.
much harder. And perhaps maybe her generation doesn't have the same. I've had the internet since I was in middle school, so it feels like such a constant part of my life, and it's only gotten worse. But that does
Yeah.
kind of lead me back to, how did people find out about Cabin Anna? So you built one for her. And I mean, I can easily see how they're finding out about it now, because this type of stuff goes viral on Instagram all the time when you see the videos of what you've created. How did you go from that first build on your mom's land, and then you said, and then people started asking about it? How did they find out about it? How did that first stage of growth happen?
Yeah, I think there's always you always have to be lucky with stuff. I think we were when I built the cabin, it was really at the start, sort of like I feel like it was even in architecture, it was sort of at the start of that kind of scale being really taken seriously as an architectural object. I mean, it's maybe partly true because even Le Corbusier had his cabins, like, but it wasn't really taken that seriously. And it's actually in the past 5 years changed completely. Like, every big architect does cabins, and it's like it's actually it's like it's become like a chair. Every great designer also has its own chair design. Um, well, at least that's how I see it. But I was lucky, I think, in the timing, in that sense. I was lucky, sometimes just lucky, that one person at the Zine, the design platform, I'm sure you know. Um, well, it's the biggest design platform in the world, and I was always a huge fan of the Zine as a teenager, and I was like, well, I built this cabin. There was a friend of mine from art school who came to take pictures, which I thought were really cool. He did an amazing job, and I was like, I worked on this for 12 months. So I asked him, where are we going to send this? Let's see if we can get it published somewhere. And you can start at your biggest dream, and then in the end you can do it also like in a regional paper or
Yeah.
something. But so he said, like, yeah, tell me, what is your biggest dream? I said, my biggest dream is the zine. So okay, then we're gonna send it there. So we send it there with a nice story, and we didn't hear anything for 2 months, and then suddenly it was there, and from that moment it was just insane. It's still we got yeah, I think we got really lucky. Still the top three most viewed video in the zine ever.
So not only did you get that, but it also is one of the most popular
Yeah,
things
no,
they've ever
yeah,
posted.
no, no, for sure. Yeah, in that year it was one of the most popular projects, and from that came also it was just a really crazy time. Like there were awards in the Netherlands. There was at some point there's this late night show in the Netherlands called Jinek. It's like the biggest late night show here. And my mother, I never watched it, but she's very famous, so I know also who she is. But my mother was watching. She watched it every night, and she was like suddenly seeing her plot of land in the show, and Yinek saying, "Yeah, there's this crazy guy who built this crazy shed for his mother," and she was calling me, and she couldn't even talk because she was so like surprised. Turn on the TV, turn on the TV, because we're on TV. Like stuff like that happened. It was like completely insane. Like it was the top three project in the Netherlands in architecture, and I was just a physicist. So I think it is a typical example, I think, of something that is maybe different, but there's many things, many people that make cool, different stuff. And then you also need to have the right timing, and it went literally viral. It was literally the perfect example of something that went completely viral. And we were very lucky that helped me start this business.
How many years ago was that?
That was now 6 years ago,
Okay.
6, 7 years ago. Yeah.
How quickly did your life change after that happened?
I would say almost instantly, because like it led to that scholarship to go to London. So I moved to London, and I found also people that started to support me also financially to be able to, hey, that's cool. Basically, like you could almost say like fans of the design. can you build another one? But this question, how would you do it if you would do the same thing, but you would do it with the knowledge you have now? So, and how much money do you need to experiment with? Like, so I was like, okay, maybe with that budget, I would change this and this. Okay, go do it. Build another one. And that helped me build another one, kept going. And that till today. And we're still, I mean, you never stop, I think.
Right.
But now we actually have something that is really developed, yeah.
How much did the design change throughout that iteration phase as people were supporting you financially to develop different designs? How different is it from the one that's on your mom's land?
Yeah, I would say it goes from almost like an art installation, as in like sort of it's really sort of very conceptual and it's quite cool. You can move the layers, but it stops the wind medium. It doesn't really have facilities. It's like really, yeah, it's really okay. The concept is there, cool, interesting. To now, it's a cabin. It's a house. You can sell everything else. You can live in this. You can. It will last 100 years. It can last, like, for example. So you ask me if I'm renting out the cabins. I'm not, but I'm very close to the company, the people that have been buying the first cabins from me and have been renting them out. And that conversation, so every 3 days, there's another family in it. Yeah, you know about this stuff, but they take children, dogs, they go in the bath with 6 people at the same time. You know, like it's the way to test, because everything that has a possibility to break will break.
And you get that feedback because people are paying for it.
You get all that feedback, all the feedback you get, and also what is intuitive, what is not intuitive. So people go like, yeah, I don't understand how. I came into the cabin and there was no place to put my clothes. I came in the cabin, I wanted to open the shell, but it didn't open. And I think, yeah, but it makes sense now what we designed. Well, maybe to me it does, but it only makes sense if people actually understand it. So you're challenged that way. And so that was incredibly important, and still is incredibly important to make a really good cabin, I think.
Yeah, and I actually think, like, I used to run a startup. So in the startup world, you talk about your minimum viable product and then iterate, right? And you're constantly seeking feedback so that you can make changes. But it's hard. We would always have to beg users to like give us feedback. But as anybody listening to this knows, in the short-term rental space, no. If they're paying you a lot of money to stay there, they will be quick to give you that feedback.
They'll tell you.
Yeah, so it's almost like the perfect place to test that out and then see, and even just noticing after a year what has worn down, what needs to be replaced after a year. Absolutely. Okay, maybe we need different materials for that or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think still there. So we always have the papers in the cabin with what was the best thing, what was the worst thing. You know, those two questions, and people are pretty constant in filling that out. So that's really great. And then you sort of also need to. I think the most difficult part is making a judgment on what kind of people are always going to complain about anything. And actually, if you listen to them, you're actually going to lose your concept. And what people actually get it and are very honest, not trying, sometimes they're very honest to you and trying almost to help you, but to me, like I think to many makers, it's still always a bit difficult to get harsh feedback. So then you sort of need to sit back and read it. Okay. This person is quite critical. Am I going to put this person in the first category or the second category? And that is sort of also being honest with yourself, I think.
That is so hard and so important. And I've talked about this a lot. I do cabin consultations where I just like talk through our experience and business model and things like that. And one of the things I talk about all the time is knowing what kind of business model you are. And we call them the unicorn, the workhorse, and the donkey, but like knowing which one you are and then knowing who your people are. Right. And I usually talk about it in the context of marketing. So then you're not trying to market to everyone. Back to what you were saying earlier about fit, you're trying to market to your people. But I have never talked about it in that way, that you have to apply the same filter when thinking about feedback. Because if they're not your people, you accidentally marketed to the wrong person and they ended up there, and then they give you feedback. If you don't know that they're not your people, you could take that feedback and fundamentally change what you're doing, when in reality, it was just a marketing mistake. Oh, you're actually not supposed to be here. Oops. Okay. Don't come back. Now let me listen to the people who are supposed to be here.
Exactly.
And have really helped.
Because it's risky, because you might actually lose some of the people that you really want to keep also.
Right. Like if we got feedback once from someone who said, the only thing that we would change is we would put a TV in here. And luckily,
perfect example.
Yeah.
Perfect
and I knew why we didn't have one and what that was for. But if I had listened to that feedback and put a TV in, then the people I really want to be there are going to see a big wall with a TV and maybe not come back, because that changes what we're telling them we're about,
Totally.
But in your mind, what makes a cabin a cabin? And that language, I'm curious, because you use the word hut a lot, which I really like. I find myself smiling every time you say that. It just is not a word I've ever used to think about this, but we use the word cabin a lot. So for you, what makes a cabin a cabin?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I actually somehow had a conversation about that with a friend. I also like the coming home is a very important part. Like, when are you for me, coming home is the opposite from being alienated from a place. So it's really, I connect to everything, I understand it, or at least on some level I understand it, not on a fundamental, but I know it, I relate to it, I connect to it, I would say. And I think, to me, that's really what cabins are about. It's really about coming home in your place in the world. Like it's the opposite from losing yourself. It's really about being home. Yeah. That's all I can say about it.
Have you made one for yourself yet? Do you have one that you can stay in whenever you want?
I know, yes and no, because because I'm very close to people that have bought my cabin. So there's always cabins where I can go and stay with those people. I actually, at the moment, like the past 2 weeks, I stayed in one of my cabins in the south of the Netherlands. I just came back 5 minutes ago before we started this interview.
Well, thank you for doing that.
No, I could have done it there also. No, I had to come back. But no, I will. Like one day when I'm. It's also about being able to have having the time, having the priority, having the financial means to do it. But it's a big dream of mine to, at some point in my life, I want to live on a day-to-day basis in my own design, connected to nature around me. It could be anywhere in the world: North America, South America, Europe. But that is sort of maybe there's one in the last few minutes to say one thing. Now that we talk about it, the biggest struggle to me is actually, and the biggest contradiction is that running this small but very time-consuming business that I really love. I love that I have the opportunity to make stuff, and to make such stuff that allows me to put so much into, and I make it so detailed and beautiful. It's exactly what I want to do. Build them for amazing people. But I could also be sitting on a mountain, every day. And I often, when I'm like, it's just really hard. It's and I also love the challenge, and it's a big adventure. But there will be a day that I will say, okay, now I've had this adventure. I brought it to a level that I want to bring it. I brought it to the people that I wanted to bring it to. Now I hand it over, and now I'm going to sit on my mountain,
Yeah. In your cabin.
In my cabin, yeah.
That's right. Well, Caspar, I have to say, this has been a true treat. And if you ever want to come to Maine, there is a cabin and a camp
That's so sweet.
that you are always welcome at, so that you can experience a little bit.
Yeah, great. No, it would be great to meet you. I'll be in the neighborhood in your neighborhood in September, October.
Okay.
So
let us know. We're right next door to Vermont. That would be great.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for doing this. It was really great to meet you. Thanks so much for joining us, and if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.